You know, it's funny, one of the quickest and easiest ways to just enhance your entire setup is by going with an awesome monitor. There are a crap ton of monitors on the market. I mean, you've got so many major brands. It's like, how do you bring something new and exciting to the industry? The Corsair HS65 gaming headset features Dolby 7.1 surround, SonarWorks Sound ID for customized audio tastes, on-ear volume controls for easy adjustment, and leatherette memory foam ear cups for fatigue-free long-term gaming sessions. To see the full feature list of the Corsair HS65 gaming headset, follow the link in the description below. We've seen LCD tech, right? CCFL, or cold cathode fluorescent lighting in the back, you know, edge-lit LEDs, backlit LEDs, and then the backlight LEDs end up getting, you know, local dimming, because how do you have something go black or like dark when it's light emitting through it? Well, you close the pixel gate. The problem with that is there's still always gonna be light bleed, or areas around it that have an individual light bleed. And you can't close individual pixels like one at a time and then still not have light bleed around it, and then what you're dealing with is having a white thing next to a black thing. It's complicated. So what's happened is over time, you get these LED monitors, which is like the standard these days. You got like nanocell tech, you know, you got extra layers on top of those gates to just sort of darken the colors, but you get these, you know, 2,000 zones now or something of where blocks of pixels can dim or turn off, but then you still get like haloing effect around those. Well, for years, we've known OLED technology has been making its way to desktop computers. We have had OLED TVs now for a long time. Now, OLEDs are organic. They're organic LEDs. And what's cool about OLED is the fact that every single pixel is actually emitting its own light. It's not a backlight shining through it. The pixel itself is the source of luminance for the actual light. So when it comes to OLED technology being awesome for perfect contrast ratios, they can go absolutely black, because when they're off, it's an infinite contrast ratio. Or in this case, a 1.35 million contrast ratio. Now, if you understand OLED technology and TVs and such, then you know that that's a legitimate number. It's not like the fake numbers that they throw out there with contrast ratios with LCDs and backlights. Okay, Jay, you're talking about OLED panel. OLEDs are nothing new. There's a few options available now. What makes the Corsair Xeneon Flex so special? Well, it's the flex part. Bendable OLEDs. I first saw bendable OLEDs in 2013 at CES. They were showing, different brands were showing ways to have it wrap around columns, and you know, all these use cases of like foldable screens. You guys have seen foldable screens in phones. So Corsair has teamed up with LG to bring you a 45-inch 3440 by 1440 0.03 millisecond response time, 240 hertz OLED bendable screen. Yeah, bendable. Why would you want bendable? Well, here's the problem. Manufacturers have had to decide, do we want to create a bend, an ultra-wide with a bend, and just about every single ultra-wide on the market today is a bent ultra-wide, usually at about 1000 R. That's typically about where the bend is. The thing is, a lot of people don't like bent screens. They don't like the curve. The idea about the curve is it's supposed to match the curvature of your eye. The human eye is about 1000 R curvature. It's supposed to make the peripheral view just a little bit less fatiguing on your eyes. The problem is not everyone likes that. So manufacturers have to decide, do we make a bent screen, or a curved screen, or do we make a flat screen? Well, Corsair with the Xeneon Flex is the first to come to market in collaboration with LG, a bendable OLED screen that gives you adjustability from flat all the way to 800R curve. But one of the problems with LCDs is off viewing angles. So the more off angle you get to, and they've calibrated this now to where up and down is usually the worst, but from side to side it's the best, because you're not always gonna be able to see perfectly straight on with your monitor. The more you go sideways, the more you get color shift because of the material that's in front of the LCD. It's the way that the matte finishes and the textures. There's a lot of reasons why the off-viewing angles for LCDs, TFTs, IPS is usually pretty good, but OLED's better than IPS. But you notice as Phil is moving to the side here, this has a 178-degree viewing angle. Anyone at home right now with an OLED TV knows how awesome this is to look at a TV from anywhere in the room and not have it shift. The other problem with OLED panels is they typically have a glass screen on the front. That's to give better saturation, better depth, better contrast, because by putting a glossy screen on there, you actually make the blacks look blacker and then the colors pop more. This has to be bendable, which means we can't do glass. But because it's bendable, I'll show you how we do it. So on the side right here, we have this mechanism, this handle that pops out, right? And we've got one on this side right here too. And if you come around to the rear, you'll see that we've got a hinge in here and a hinge here, as well as here and here. Now this is a metal construction here. The handles are metal, the mechanism is metal, which means that it's going to be very robust. So right now it's perfectly flat. As I bend it, right, you just grab it from these handles. Don't put your thumbs on the screen. Don't put your palms on the screen. Just grab it by the handle and pull in. Now you can see we had a click right there. So that's basically the first position. But we can continue, and you see it's taking some force. That's the thing, they thought about this. They don't want it scooting back or anything like that. It's gonna stay where you put it. But I'm gonna go ahead and bend it more till we get a second click, and that's gonna be where our max bend radius or curve is. So now we've got an 800 curve. So if I were sitting directly in front of it, this would be really immersive if you were playing like a driving game, a simulator, or some sort of flight sim or something like that. But that's the thing, you could, if you wanted, curve it for that use case, and then when you're done, just put it back. There you go. Now, because of the limitations of it being curved, you do have tilt adjustment. As you can see, you get about 15 degrees up and about 5 degrees down, which is pretty standard. There is no height adjustment, and there is no swivel. There's also no VESA mount, because the mechanism that this is all attached to is what's very required to make this a thing that you can do with it. Phil cringes a little bit every time I do that, but trust me, it's designed to be able to just really be manhandled if you wanted. So yeah, it's cool, man. I like it. I like it a lot. So this is where I personally like it. Just a slight amount of curve in there. It's not too crazy. My biggest issue with curved panels is when there's a lot of curve, like 800R. You get this weird kind of a sound effect where the sound is reflecting in there and coming back at you. If you're live streaming or something, that could get very awkward. But you know, if you're just playing games and consuming, then you know, it's up to you to be able to choose. But I mean, you can make it perfectly flat, you know. Just felt it click in right there. As you can see, we're back to perfectly flat. So it's pretty awesome. But they thought of the fact that if you're stuck with a base, let's make the base have some sort of functionality. So if you come around to the back over here, all the electronics and stuff are in here, because this is an extremely thin panel if you haven't noticed. But what we have here is 3 inputs, a DisplayPort 1.4, 2 HDMI 2.1. Do you know why 2.1 is awesome? Because this is also an HDR panel. Now in terms of the HDR standard, there's a new standard being set for OLED specifically, so this doesn't have an actual standard. This is also a very early engineering sample. So we can't actually go in here and do like full in-depth color testing or anything like that. This boasts a 240 Hertz and a 0.03 gray to gray refresh rate. So in terms of gaming, that's absolutely nuts. But anyway, as I was saying here, so it means you can hook up your 4K Blu-ray players, your HDR players, and your consoles like that PS5 or whatever that may have, you know, HDR and needs 2.1. There they are right there. We also have 2 USB-C, one on the top and one on the bottom. This gives us pass-through connectivity. It also has a 65-watt charger. Quick charge a phone or a laptop that's USB-C. And then we have 2 USB 3.0 right here. Here's our power. And if we go and look at the front, so you can see I actually have 2 wireless dongles plugged in right here for the wireless mouse and keyboard. So that gives us very clean, very direct signal without having to wire it under the desk or have any sort of interference. We also have a headphone jack. There is volume control on this, but it controls the headphone jack. There are no speakers in this. Input select, power, and then of course this is our directional joystick for our OSD. And it's very locked down, like I said, engineering sample. We can't go in there, we can't play with the brightness, we can't play with any of the contrast ratios, color settings, none of that. It's very early access. This is expected to be going into production in Q4 of this year. Availability potentially end of Q4, probably beginning of 2023, probably Q1 somewhere in there. I have been begging for I have 2 OLEDs at home, and in my game room, if you guys have seen that build, I have an OLED screen, and I've been begging for OLEDs on desktop. My problem is I also like big format monitors. 45 inches. Now let's talk about the resolution here real quick. I'm a little disappointed unfortunately, Corsair, I do have a disappointment about this 45-inch panel being a 3440 by 1440. It looks fine when you're looking at games and desktop content, or we'll even show you guys some official like HDR content here in a second, as best as we can show it since we're not shooting HDR. Text, you can start to see the individual pixels at this size format at 3440 by 1440. There are 4K wide by 1600 panels. At home, I have a 38-inch LG ultra-wide 3840 by 1600, and I can't see the pixels on that. Now, granted, it's a 38-inch and not a 45. I feel like this would have been, in this format, that would have been awesome to have that kind of size layout. But I can get past that personally because, again, it's OLED. The colors are absolutely perfect. It's 99% DCI P3. OLEDs, if you've never experienced an OLED, it's like me trying to explain to you how high refresh rate is if you've never experienced anything above 60 FPS. It's just doesn't translate through words. You have to see it. Speaking of seeing it, let's go ahead and look at some content here. Now you might notice it dimmed right now. And the reason why it did that is someone's probably already typed before watching to this part of the video, yeah, but it's OLED, burn-in. Burn-in's a problem. Remember the early like plasmas and stuff? Very similar to that, where if you have some sort of a display, like an OSD or something here. So you've always got a taskbar, unless you hide it, in Windows. You've got a desktop. You've got icons that don't really move. It does have very aggressive built-in burn-in protection that you would find in all the LG TVs that are also OLED. So OLEDs have been around for a long time, burn-in protection. Look, my OLED at home, my kids leave it on all the time. Sure, a lot of the TVs have built-in screen protectors and stuff that move around, but this does have burn-in protection that will have, it has pixel shift, it has dimming, it has all sorts of fail-safes in there to make sure that you are not burning in any of the pixels or getting any sort of retention in there. Especially when you have like, white day and time showing and stuff down there. So they do have all of that built in. If you've ever tried to watch a movie that has a lot of dark scenes, let's say The Dark Knight, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, anything that has a lot of dark scenes, you don't realize how much of the movie you've actually missed until you watch it on an OLED, where you can have perfect pixel separation. So what do I mean by that? Let's pause right here. We have dark things happening here in the shadows. We've got bright things happening here in the sunlight. I don't know how well the camera's picking it up, but I can individually see the palm prawns in the shadows right here. I can see them. They're barely visible because the pixel is generating the exact amount of light that the editors expected there to be generated. So it is showing exactly as it was intended to be seen by the movie creators. If this were an LCD or an LED backlight, this would just be a smudged, shadowed mess. You would never see the individual palms like I'm seeing right now. So here's another example. You've got this highlight on the face, and you've got these shadows right next to it. But what I can see by looking straight on is I can see the palm prawns coming across the face, and I can still see the hair braids going up through there. And this is still with YouTube compression. If this was an actual 4K Blu-ray DVD right now, we would see this even better than we're seeing on YouTube right now. And the fact that I can still see all that. You can see the individual lines right here. You would never see that with an LCD or an LED LCD, whatever. You might be going, this is a computer monitor. Who cares what the movies look like? Come on, let's be real. We consume content you're consuming content on your device right now. Okay, sure, it's not HDR, but you've probably watched movies on your computer at some point. You probably play games that have dark scenes and light scenes, and a lot of games these days support HDR for this very reason. So having the ability to see a true 21:9 cinematic wide screen with no black bars and can game on it and has multiple inputs, so you don't have to switch between things like having a separate TV for your consoles if you're gonna game on console. You have all of this, which just looks absolutely fantastic. Okay, so that was Avatar. Let's see what we can find that's also... Okay, here we go. Ride of Rohirrim. Sorry, I don't do Lord of the Rings. I don't know what that is. I just don't. But here's an example. This is another one of those movies that has a lot of dark scenes, as you can see. It's all dark, but I'm not having any problem seeing anything. And we're in a fairly bright room. Because here's the thing, the brighter the room, oh, he's ugly. Okay, the brighter the room is, the harder it is to see the shadows on a TV. Usually you need the TV to be the only thing emitting light. I say TV because it's the only OLED experience I have. I can't wait to have this on my desk for me to use personally. The TV or the screen needs to be the only thing emitting light to see the dark scenes. We have studio lights shooting at this, and Phil, point up. We have our house lights on. And I can still see all of this darkness, like all of the, look at this, you can see the chainmail. Yeah, you can barely see it because you can barely see it. But the fact is, you can see it. These are gray pixels being drawn next to black pixels. So you don't have to deal with local dimming or any of that kind of crap. Local dimming, in my opinion, was the worst way to get around trying to get great contrast ratios on backlit panels, personally. So the fact that this is now an OLED sitting on the desk, I can't even begin to explain to you how happy this makes me. All right, so let's talk about Ufo Test here. This is where we can test the frame rates of the panel. Remember, 240 hertz. At 240 hertz, it's amazing. Now here's the thing, we don't have any overdrive control. I don't know if there can be overclocking available to this. I have no idea what kind of modes there's gonna be to either force overdrive when it comes to refresh rate and response time. But right now, out of the box, how this is set up, which is going to be the 0.03 millisecond gray to gray and 240 hertz, the UFO is crisp as can be. There's no ghosting in front or behind. As the stars go by, there's no trails. There's no trail behind the UFO. It's kind of nuts how good this looks. I don't think I've actually seen a UFO test look this good for any panel out of the box. That's because I've never actually used this on any sort of an OLED. Now, I think the biggest disappointment, in my opinion, is the 3440 by 1440. But this is probably a cost move. I have no idea what this panel costs. I don't, I'll be honest with you. I asked and they were like, hey, well, you know, not announced yet. The announcements of this panel are part of this video. This video is on announcement day for this panel. But I can tell you right now, it checks a lot of the boxes that I'm looking for. I'm telling you right now though, it's going to be expensive. And only people that are, look, if you're an audiophile, then you get it. If you like, if you care about home cinema, and see if OLED's at home, you're gonna want this on your desk. You know you're going to. The curve is what makes it cool. Because I'm personally farsighted. So I like to push my panel as far back as I can possibly get it. Which means the curve is less important to me. Phil, however, is very nearsighted. He sits about 3 times closer to his panel than I do. But for him, he likes the curve, but he can adjust that curve to be exactly what he wants it to be. So anyway, in terms of the build quality, you can see it's not very wobbly. I mean, it does have some flex, of course it's going to, because it's sitting on that tilt. And you can see the panel does actually flex, you know. That's why the handles exist. These handles do retract back inside. Just this exact one doesn't because of the fact that it's super early engineering sample, so the button that exists to make it retract isn't there yet. So again, that's how early access this video is. This handle is always there for the tilt adjustment. The legs do stick out quite a bit. And that's because it needs, obviously it needs stability. With all the electronics being in the back, in that vertical part, fortunately, you can scoot it pretty far back on your desk. Some big panels like this have a long kickstand leg that stick out in the rear. Then it's kind of stuck in the middle, and then I wouldn't like it because I can't push it away from me like I'm used to. All my panels, like my panels at home and stuff, are on VESA mount arms. Like I said, no VESA mount on this. It would be kind of a hard thing to do to bend it and have it be rigid as it's on an arm. Not to mention, again, the stand is also the electronics. Because if you look down the side again, you'll see the only thickness to this panel, with the exception of the arms supporting it, is just the LCD, or excuse me, the OLED panel itself. And then I'm sure there's a ribbon cable or something that connects to that back piece, which is what drives it. Anyway, that's kind of all I had to show you today. The build quality feels fantastic. Oh, I take that back. There's one other thing I need to tell you. 3.5 kilograms. I think that's light in imperial units just because I know how it feels like this. I have no idea what that is in actual pounds. So Phil will have to put on there what it is in pounds for those of us that, you know, like to be different. It's not heavy like an OLED TV because it doesn't have the thick glass panel on the front of it. Or the big giant, you know, form factor of it, obviously. A little bit of warmth does come off the rear because again, this is the electronics right here. But all in all, it's nice to see somebody thinking outside of the box when it comes to panel technology. I've said this before, the things that are super boring these days. Cases, monitors, peripherals. Everybody needs them, everyone interacts with those things every day, but how do you literally think outside the box? Well, by letting it do this. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you've liked this first look at this monitor. When the final engineering sample is done, we will get our hands on it. That way we can go and do full color testing and stuff, so we can see if it lives up to all of those claims. But I mean, it's OLED. As long as the pixel shift technology and the anti-burn-in works really well, you're really only limited to the lifespan of either the electronics or the organic LEDs themselves. Which I'll tell you right now, I've got some OLEDs that go way back to like 2015 with no burn-in, no blotchy, no issues. So that's the next logical step in panel tech. What we need now is the wallpaper. Just like the LG wallpaper TV now, so you can literally just like stick it to your wall and then you have a ribbon cable you run through the wall and then it connects somewhere else. Then you literally would have a panel that is as flat as it could possibly be. I mean, look how thin it is. They're almost there.